The store was bustling that late afternoon. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed between the shelves, mixed with the clatter of bags and the banal conversations of customers. Everything seemed normal, until the door slowly opened and a man entered. He was in no hurry. There was no sparkle in his eyes. He carried the weight of decades on his shoulders, and in his hands a simple, worn hat. He wore an old, weather-stained coat and leaned on a cane. His steps were slow, hesitant, but each movement revealed a quiet dignity. He walked the aisles as if searching for something that might no longer exist. A little kindness. The bored young clerk watched the scene with disdain. She whispered something to her colleague next to her and laughed. "Look, another lost old man." The laughter echoed between the shelves, cold, sharp. The veteran approached with difficulty. He strained to see the labels, his trembling hands groping the shelves. And that's when the clerk approached, with that fake smile that precedes cruelty. "Do you need help? Or are you just here for a walk?" he said sarcastically. The veteran looked up. For a brief moment, the silence was heavy. "I'm just looking for something I can afford." But the clerk didn't remain silent. "Then you'd better find another store, you useless old man. We sell good stuff here." The sentence fell like a stone. Some customers stared. Others pretended not to hear. And the veteran just looked down. This is the scene that captivates the audience. The tone is one of pure indignation. The viewer feels their stomach churn, their heart race. Because everyone at some point has seen something like this happen. Someone being humiliated, treated as if invisible. But what no one there imagined was that this useless old man had a history of bringing anyone to their knees. He didn't answer. He didn't scream. He just turned slowly, with the same calm gaze of someone who'd seen the worst of humanity. And while the clerk laughed, a woman watching from afar murmured to herself, It can't be." The camera focuses on the veteran's face, the wrinkles, the scars, the distant gaze, as if every memory of the war still burned within him. Sometimes the hero the world forgot is the same one who once saved people like you, without you ever knowing. The silence in the store now seems to scream. The audience senses that something grand is about to happen, a revelation that will reverse roles, tear down masks, and make every viewer reflect. Indignation, curiosity, and empathy mingle. The audience wants to see the clerk pay for what he said. They want to understand who that man is. And above all, he wants justice. That day, an employee would learn the hard way that there are people you should never underestimate, especially those who have seen death up close. The truth is that useless old man, as the clerk called him, had once been anything but useless. Before the wrinkles, before the cane, before the worn clothes, there was a soldier, a man who had known hell up close, who had seen friends fall just feet away, who had learned to live with the sound of explosions echoing in his head, even after the war ended. But no one in that store knew that. To them, he was just another ordinary old man, trying to survive in a world that had forgotten the meaning of respect. The veteran lived alone in a small house on the outskirts of town. The cracked walls held memories no one cared to hear anymore. On the shelf, a black and white photograph showed a young man in uniform with a tired smile and a look of courage. Beside him, a rusty metal box. Inside, medals, letters, and a burnt piece of cloth, the remains of the flag he had carried during the conflict. He didn't say much. Those who saw him walking slowly through the streets had no idea that this man had already been wounded, carried comrades in his arms, faced sandstorms and hunger, and fought for people who would never know him. But time is cruel to silent heroes. After the war, oblivion came. Taxes ceased. Government promises faded. And the veteran lived off odd jobs, collecting scraps, helping neighbors in exchange for food. Yet, he never lost his kindness. He greeted everyone, even those who didn't intend to see him. He was grateful for any help, even when he received scorn in return. He was a man who knew the value of humility and the weight of other people's pride. That day, he had saved his last coins to buy a simple gift, a small toy for the son of a neighbor, whose family he secretly helped. He had no children. He had lost his only son during the war. But he still believed that every act of kindness was a way to keep humanity alive. So he entered that store. Then, even tired and aching, he tried to smile as he asked the clerk for help. But the world doesn't always give back what we give. And it was there, faced with cold stares and muffled laughter, that he realized something painful. The war may be over, but the battles never cease for those who bear invisible scars. As the clerk mocked him, the veteran remained calm. With each cruel word, he remembered the screams of his wounded comrades, the promises that one day everything would be different. But nothing had changed. The battlefield now had a different name: society. And yet, he chose not to react. Because he had learned long ago that some fights are not worth fighting in anger, but in silence. The kind of silence that is more humiliating than any answer. The audience in that moment feels their hearts sink. Empathy is inevitable. The camera in the visual narrative shows the contrast between the false shine of the shop windows and the veteran's empty gaze. Every detail reinforces the emotional weight. The trembling hands holding his hat, the sweat dripping down his forehead, the tired body trying to maintain dignity in the face of humiliation. And the voiceover enters, serious and reflective. People quickly forget who once protected them. They forget that the freedom they used to laugh costs the blood of those who can barely walk today. The veteran tries to hide his sad look, but the audience can see. That man is not weak. He simply carries a burden too heavy to explain. The mood is ripe for impact. The audience wants revenge. They want to see the employee pay. But you don't yet know that fate is about to change, and when it does, it will be brutal. The veteran walked slowly through the aisles of the store, the sound of fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. He was carrying a small toy car in his hands, the gift he intended to give to the neighbor's child. It seemed like a simple gesture, harmless. But sometimes evil disguises itself as routine. Across the counter, a young clerk watched him with disdain. Arms crossed, impatient look, mocking smile. In his mind, that old man was just another hindrance delaying the service. "Are you really going to buy that, sir?" the clerk asked, drawing out his words ironically. The veteran looked up, calm. "Yes, please. It's a little priceless. Could you check for me?" The boy let out an exaggerated sigh. "Sure. But next time, try to find something with a label." And he turned away, muttering something like, "You should be in the nursing home, not here." Some customers heard. They chuckled softly. The veteran pretended not to notice. But the tightness in my chest came, strong, dry, cruel. It was the same kind of pain he felt when someone called him a relic, dead weight, burden of the state. The employee returned, carelessly throwing the toy on the counter. 23 reais. Are you going to pay in coins too?" The provocation came sharp. The veteran slowly opened his worn wallet. He took out crumpled notes, some coins carefully kept. "It's all I have," he said with a slight smile, trying to maintain his dignity. The boy rolled his eyes. "Everything you have? Then you should spend it on something more useful, like a bath." Laughter. The knowing smiles of those who find humor in other people's suffering. The veteran's silence was the heaviest response he could give. But the employee wanted more. I wanted to get some reaction out of him, something that would make him feel victorious. "Hey, old man, you know what they told me the other day?" he teased, leaning against the counter. "That we should stop supporting people like you, who live off the government and still come here asking for a discount." The veteran looked up, and for an instant, the boy felt something strange. A chill. That look was not that of a helpless old man. It was the look of someone who had seen death up close. But the employee didn't notice. "Stand there like a lamppost," he chuckled. "I bet you can't even move properly, can you?" The veteran took a deep breath. "I've already moved enough. For people who don't even remember me today." The employee didn't understand the sentence. He laughed again, and it was at that moment that the manager appeared, attracted by the little commotion. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice firm. The employee pointed to the veteran. "Nothing, boss. Just trying to help this old man understand the basics." The manager looked at him disapprovingly, but before he could speak, the veteran tried to justify himself. "I just wanted to buy a present, sir." And that's when the employee, without thinking, said the phrase that silenced the entire room. "Present? A useless old man like you shouldn't even be here." The sound of footsteps stopped. The air seemed to freeze. The veteran stood still, his eyes filled with tears. The manager was in shock. Some customers, embarrassed, lowered their gaze. Others discreetly recorded with their cell phones. After all, humiliating others always gets more views than empathy. The silence lasted seconds, but it felt like an eternity. The veteran left the toy on the counter and turned to leave. "No need," he said softly. "Keep it." And he started walking towards the door. But fate, cruel as always, had something more in store. Before he crossed the exit, the manager called him. "Wait, sir, please. Wait a moment." The tone had completely changed. The manager was staring at something the employee couldn't see. A small badge attached to the veteran's backpack. A golden symbol, the initials of a military division that the manager knew very well. The silence was different now, dense, heavy, full of guilt. And what would come next would completely change the course of that story. The manager approached slowly, his gaze fixed on the small badge hanging from the veteran's worn backpack. It was old, the metal already darkened by time. But the markings were unmistakable. The crest of an elite military division. The same one the manager's father had served in. He swallowed hard. The air seemed to disappear from the room. The employee, still with a mocking smile, didn't understand what was happening. "What's up, boss?" he asked impatiently. "Are you going to let the old man go, or do you want me to call security?" But the manager didn't answer. He moved closer until he was face to face with the veteran. "Sir," he said, his voice trembling. "Did you serve in the 42nd Company?" The veteran stopped. He turned slowly, his tired eyes meeting the manager's. "Yes. A long time ago." He gave a melancholy half-smile. "Most of my companions didn't come back." The manager felt his stomach churn. That sentence went through him like a bolt of lightning. The 42nd Company. The same battalion as his father, missing in action. "My God," he murmured. "Did you know Captain Alvaro Mendez?" The veteran remained silent for a few seconds, as if searching his memory for a face lost in time. Then he nodded slowly. "Alvaro. He was my commander. A brave man. He died saving many of us." The manager took a step back. The name echoed in his mind like thunder. "Alvaro Mendez, your father." The employee, noticing the change in tone, looked confused. "What's up, boss? Is everything okay?" he asked, laughing awkwardly. "Who's that old man again?" The manager turned to him, his eyes filled with something the employee had never seen before: respect, pain, and anger. "This old man, as you called him, fought alongside my father." He paused, taking a deep breath. He risked his life for this country. Silence filled the store. Some customers began to approach, curious. The veteran looked down, uncomfortable with the sudden attention, but the manager knelt before him, not caring who watched. "Sir, forgive me. Forgive me for what that idiot said." His voice cracked. "If it weren't for men like you, I wouldn't even be here." The clerk turned pale. The laughter disappeared from his face. A customer's cell phone was shaking in her hands. She was filming everything. The veteran, not understanding the extent of the commotion, tried to contain the manager. "No need for that, my boy. It's over." But the manager insisted. "No, sir. What happened here is unforgivable." He stood up, turning to the employee. "You're fired." The voice was cold, cutting. The employee tried to argue. "Boss, I didn't know," he stammered. "How was I supposed to guess who he was?" "Exactly for that reason," the manager replied. "You didn't need to know who he was to treat him with respect." The crowd began to murmur. Some clapped, others just watched, embarrassed. But the veteran, calm as ever, placed his hand on the manager's shoulder. "Son, don't hold a grudge." He looked around, his gaze seemingly spanning the years. "Life has taught me that ignorance hurts more than war." The manager couldn't hold back his tears. "My father," he said, emotionally. "If he were alive, he would be proud of you." The veteran smiled, with the serenity of someone who carries the weight of the past without regrets. "Your father was a good man. He saved me when I thought I wouldn't make it out alive." And after a pause, "Now I understand why fate brought me here." The surrounding audience fell silent. The heavy air from before was transformed into something new, a mixture of respect and collective regret. No one dared to move. The employee, head down, tried to hide behind the counter, embarrassed. But it was too late. The truth had been revealed. And with it, a cruel reminder. Sometimes the greatest battles a hero faces happen long after the war, when the world has forgotten what he sacrificed. The silence that filled the store was almost palpable. No one dared say a word. The veteran remained motionless, his gaze distant, as if memories of the war had once again echoed within his mind. But now it wasn't explosions or gunshots that surrounded him. It was eyes full of shame, regret, respect. The manager took a deep breath. His voice, previously firm, now trembled. "Sir, the least I can do is offer you whatever you want, on the house." The veteran tried to refuse, polite as ever. "No need, young man. I just came to buy something simple, nothing more." But the manager insisted, emotionally. "No, sir. You won't pay for anything here today." He turned to the customers and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "This man is a hero, and he was humiliated inside my store. This will not go unnoticed." The words echoed like thunder. Suddenly, something began to change in the air. A lady approached, gently holding the veteran's hands. "My son also served, sir," she said, her eyes welling up. "Thank you for what you did for all of us." A man behind her started clapping. Soon others followed. Within seconds, the sound of clapping filled the room, and the veteran, who minutes before had been treated like trash, was now the center of a spontaneous tribute. The employee, motionless behind the counter, watched the scene with a completely pale face. Shame burned her skin. He tried to get closer, perhaps to apologize, but his legs didn't seem to respond. The manager glanced at him and said in a cold voice, "It's too late." The employee lowered his head, unable to meet the veteran's gaze. The old man, however, called him with a simple gesture. "Come here, boy." The employee hesitated. "Sir, I don't deserve—" "I know," the veteran replied calmly. "But I want to look into your eyes." The boy approached, embarrassed. The veteran looked deep into his soul and said, "You called me useless. But I've heard worse, you know? In the war they called me crazy for not giving up." He paused. "Today you gave me a gift without realizing it. You reminded me that respect is what separates a common man from a coward." The clerk swallowed hard. The words hit him like a blow. Tears began to stream down her face. I'm sorry, sir. I'm really sorry." The veteran just nodded. "I hope you learn from this. War teaches, but it takes a heavy toll." The manager, touched by the scene, placed his hand on the veteran's shoulder. "You have no idea how much this store owes you now." The old man smiled. "What do they owe me?" he asked calmly. "You taught us a lesson," the manager replied. "One I'll never forget." The customers, still with tears in their eyes, continued to applaud. Some recorded the scene, others just cried in silence. It was as if, in that moment, everyone felt the weight of the injustice the veteran carried. Not just the injustice he suffered in the war, but the injustice he faced every day as he was invisible to the eyes of the world. And for the first time in a long time, that forgotten man felt that there was still respect. That, despite the scars and time, there were still people capable of recognizing the value of those who gave everything and received so little. Outside, the sun was already setting, dyeing the sky orange and red. The veteran walked slowly to the door, leaning on his cane. Before leaving, he turned to the manager and said, "Take good care of your men. In war, the commander who loses the respect of his men loses everything." The manager just nodded silently, knowing that those words would be etched in his mind forever. The veteran crossed the street, blending into the crowd. And while the sound of applause still echoed inside the store, everyone understood something they would never forget. Sometimes true heroes don't wear uniforms, they just carry scars that time will never erase. The veteran walked slowly down the sidewalk, gradually disappearing among the hurried people. No one there knew who he was. No one could imagine what that man had done for them all. It's strange how the world forgets so quickly. Heroes who risked everything now walk alone, with memories no one wants to hear. And the worst? Sometimes they are judged, humiliated, as if their past had no value. The veteran walked in silence, passing cars, storefronts, and city lights. The music swelled, creating a sense of melancholy and respect. But that day, inside that store, something changed. An arrogant man learned humility. A manager remembered the weight of gratitude, and everyone there saw with their own eyes what it means to have honor. The employee, sitting alone in the store parking lot with his hands on his face, Because life has a curious way of giving back what we give. The same disrespect he showed returned as shame, and the same contempt he showed returned as a lesson he will never forget. Slowly, the scene fades to the veteran arriving home. A small framed photo on the table shows him younger, smiling alongside his fellow soldiers. All in uniform, all alive, frozen in time. He places the photo in front of him, lights a candle, and closes his eyes. The silence of the night is heavy, but somehow, it feels lighter than before. Perhaps for a moment, he felt there was still justice in this world. And you? How many times have you walked past someone and judged them by their appearance? How many incredible stories have you ignored because their face looked tired, or their clothes seemed too plain? The truth is, we never know the weight another person carries. We never know what someone went through to be alive today. And sometimes, the one the world calls useless is the same one who fought so the world could exist. Respect before judging. Listen before laughing. Because a man's true worth lies not in what he has, but in what he did when no one else had the courage. Veterans don't ask for applause. They only ask for something the world is forgetting: respect.